So, I wanted to talk about how abusers corrupt a victim's memory. And we kind of touched on this a little bit before in the video about how abusers can wake you up when you're sleeping, like assaulting you. Uh, so that interferes with your sleep, or they can keep you awake with the 10-hour lecture, monologue, haranguing, berating session that seems to go on forever and ever. And so that also prevents you from going to sleep. And the reason why that's important, both of those, is that your short term converts to long term memory when you're sleeping. So if you are not getting sleep, you're not getting enough sleep or not getting good quality sleep, you're going to have gaps in your memory because your short term memory is not getting um, converted to long term memory. So that's one way that they do it. Another way, however, that they do it is okay. So anytime that you are remembering something, you are in essence remembering a copy. So the further out you get, it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. You're not remembering the thing, you're remembering the last time you were thinking about it. You're remembering your memory of thinking about the thing. So, what ends up happening in so many abuse dynamics is that the abuser and the victim will be arguing over something, and those arguments may continue in multiple instances. I mean, you could be arguing about the same thing for years, quite honestly. And so, every time you are having that argument about the incident and you're bringing it up in your mind, you're not bringing up the incident in your mind more so as you are bringing up your recollection of the last time you thought about the incident. And if the last time you thought about the incident, or many times that you've thought about the incident, is when an abuser was in your face, when you're in an elevated stress, fight or flight kind of response, and also the abuser is telling you, no, 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 this is what happened. And the thing about communication people don't realize is that you can say something to a person that triggers their own mind to think of the thing. And when we think of something in that way, it becomes as if a memory. That's why I've talked about why the media that we watch and songs that we listen to, that it can be so, one of the reasons why it's so important to be careful about what you're watching is because that is putting those images in your mind essentially. And just like, I don't know, a horror movie might dump something terrible in your mind, or watching some yeah, I was unsupervised on the internet when I was younger, and there are things you can't unsee. So anyway, those images live rent free in your mind, and they can be brought up. If you've already seen it and someone talks about it, it can be brought up in your mind. So when the abuser is telling a victim their version of reality, which is not real, it either distorted or an outright fabrication, their version of reality, it's triggering in your mind thinking about bringing to life their version of what they're saying is true. And so that is happening, co occurring as you are remembering your copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. So it can get to a point where victims of abuse either don't remember what happened to them or are deeply, deeply confused about what happened to them. I've gotten to a point where legitimately my memory has been terrible. And it's only because I've had documentation that I'm like, oh, yeah, you know what? This did happen to me. And in fact, I've come across articles I've written referencing things that were happening at the time. And it was like, oh, I forgot about that. Okay, this was worse than I remember. So the documentation piece was really helpful for me. And I mean, I say this all the time, especially as a paralegal, like document, because even if it's not something you would use, let's say in a court type situation, um, it still can help you remember. It can still give you like an artifact of the things that have happened to you. And the other thing that I do, or have done, is I remember what I was thinking about the incident. So even if I couldn't necessarily go, "Oh, I remember this 100%," I remember what I was thinking, and why I was thinking it. And so that to me has been a pretty solid guidepost in terms of uh remembering. So I'll give you an example. My son's father and I were having okay. One of the ways he was abusive was financially. So at this point, we're in two separate households, and I'm doing the very responsible mom parent stuff. We're reading to bed every night, and we're brushing teeth, and we're having our vegetables, and we're, getting out on adventures, and we're doing all the healthy things that you should be doing as a parent. What is dad doing? Dad is ordering pizza, not doing bedtime routine, not brushing teeth, not giving him vegetables. If he had water, like who knows? Like our son ended up putting on so much weight because of the way he was feeding him. And I was just like, I'm trying so hard, and you're literally undoing every single thing that I'm doing. And so we ended up arguing about, you know, the food thing. I was like, I can't, it has to reach a certain level before it's actionable, and it, even with the weight gain, it wasn't to that level. But I was standing firm on the brushing the teeth because I was like, listen, you're going to give our kid cavities. This is, he does not need to be getting drilled. Like, all you have to do is brush his teeth before bedtime. Like, this was like the one thing where I'm like, just do this one thing, just it once a day at the end of the day before he goes to sleep, and is in bed for 8 to 10 hours, and the bacteria is doing what it does. Just do that. And he said they're just baby teeth, they'll fall out, we don't have to brush his teeth. So when I brought it up to him, I think it was like a couple years ago, he was like, I didn't say that. I was like, oh, yes, you did. You absolutely did. And the thing is, I don't remember the conversation in the sense that, like, I remember where we were and, the whole genesis of the conversation and everything like that. But I remember my thoughts. I remember what I thought. I remember being angry and frustrated and upset. So I remember this interior state. So if anyone put me on a stand and was like, tell us more about this situation, where were you? I'd be like, I have no idea. How long did this conversation last? I don't, who knows? Um, what else did you discuss? I have no idea. And so there are these incidents like that. Like, I remember we used to argue over Christmas where he was like, "Oh, not all kids get Christmas." And I was like, are we having this conversation? Like, this is the most insane shit I've ever heard in my life. And so again, can't tell you where that conversation occurred. I got to guess. I don't know how long it took. I don't, because I'm remembering a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, but I do remember my thoughts very, very strongly. And so I can hold on to my thoughts about the situation. Again, I'm not saying that would hold up in a court of law. This is often why cases with victims end up not going very well, especially if you didn't document immediately so that you have those details, or if you didn't tell somebody so that you have, proof that you told somebody. You've got kind of like I mean, it's technically hearsay, I don't know. It depends on how that might get admitted. But if you tell someone, or if you write it down, you have a much better chance of holding on to those details that you're going to need for later. The other thing too is that abusers isolate their victims. And here's the third way they corrupt your memory. They isolate you. So there are times when I've been talking to my brother and he remembers pieces of our childhood that I don't remember. And I remember pieces of our childhood that he doesn't remember. And then we get together and we remind each other. And it's like, oh yeah, that thing did happen. And it's not all traumatic. Sometimes it's funny. Um, but when the abuser isolates the victim from people, they can't get those reminders of things from outside sources. So you're not getting enough sleep. You're not converting that short-term memory to long-term memory. You are possibly in fight or flight. So the cortisol and the osteocalcin and other hormones are firing. And dopamine is a salience hormone. It's a hormone that tells you what to pay attention to. that doesn't mean the dopamine will go, "Hey, brain, remember all of these things because you're gonna need these for a legal, case later." It might be, "Hey, pay attention to this person, they're dangerous right now, and you should be afraid for your life," and that's what you remember. So, and then also the piece that I was talking about in terms of remembering a copy of a copy, and then finally, because you're being isolated, so you can't be reminded from other people about what is true or things that you've said, your perspective, or even an outside perspective on the situation. So it's like it's like remembering a dream. So part of my spiritual practice, and this was true. Wow. mm, Part of my spiritual practice is trying to remember my dreams. And the thing is, you have to still be kind of asleep in that sleep state. And then you have to think about the dream as thoroughly as possible, um, to remember all of the details that you can, and to just kind of go over it and over and over it so that when you wake up and you start to think about different things and your brain goes off in a different direction, you can still remember, oh, this detail then you leads you to the dream that you were trying to remember, like if you don't write it down instantly. And so that is a similar way one could use to remember these incidences where you have one piece, but you go, okay, yes, this is the standout thing that's gonna allow me to remember back to this, so I can get to a point where I can document it and write it down. Because again, if you've been sitting there for 10 hours or however long it is, and they're berating you and they're engaging in emotional abuse, I mean, again, I'm a parent. Any come to Jesus conversation should not last longer than an hour. And honestly, you really probably should be in like the 15 to 30-minute zone, depending on the issue. Um, no one should be sitting there for hours haranguing you, berating you. That's just they want to yell. They're mad and they want to yell. That's not productive. So anyway, I hope this makes sense and I will talk to you next time.